All right. And we are live. Welcome in, everybody. This is episode 147 of Calibrated with Scott. I am, of course, Scott. It is good to see all of my Euro bros in here. I know that this podcast is happening a little bit earlier today. That is by intention. So welcome in, everybody. Obviously, for those of you who have been in here, you know how I like to do things. I like to see where you guys are from. And so far we have an individual from Hungary, an individual from Macedonia. Happy Easter weekend, everybody. I hope everybody had a fantastic time with their families or by themselves if you are, alone in the world where you're at right now. I don't have family around me, so I was alone for Easter. I have my girlfriend, but, she has her family here. I don't necessarily have my family here, but that's okay. So hopefully everybody is doing good and had a fantastic weekend. Let's see here. South Sacramento, California. Nice. Kelowna, Canada. Nice. Ottawa, Canada. Puerto Rico, Serbia, Scranton, Pennsylvania, Finland. Hello. How are you doing? Perfect stream time for Nigeria. Nice. Happy Easter to you as well. Genti, I want to say. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, man. It's good to see everybody. All right. Let me go ahead and just post that we are live right now, and then we will jump right into the updates, everybody. I hope everybody is having a good Monday after the weekend. It's always kind of hard to get back into the swing of things. And that's what we're doing here, right? We took the weekend off and now we're back. So posting my live and then we will get into it, everyone. We'll take you over to the map real quick and we can start looking at some aspects of this map. We will start down here in the Zaporizhzhia region. Let me just retweet my live stream. Okay, and we're done. Phone's going away. All right. So, welcome in, everybody. Yes, the Pope is dead. Before we get started, the Pope did die. I believe he died on, at least it was 4/20 for me, and he died at the age of 88. That's, I don't follow the Pope or the Catholic Church particularly in depth, so this wasn't a huge deal for me personally. But yeah, that is a piece of news that happened today or yesterday. All right. So here in the Zaporizhzhia region, we have a Russian assault that took place basically from Pokrovka into Malotakmak. And this assault established a foothold for the Russians in the southeastern edge of Malotakmak. This is very important because this village is actually more or less one large city is more how I would consider this. So instead of just, Malotakmak and Orikhiv and Novoandrivka, this is more or less one large town that is just slightly separated by a field in between some of these places. So here between Orikhiv and Novoandrivka, it's basically just, 6, 7, 8 city blocks of openness between these two urban areas. So really it's just one big city here. And that's how I think you guys should really look at this is you'll see this across the board too. And I'll show you this in different areas right now as we go through. But you can see Orikhiv right now, the Russians are pushing up on the eastern and western flanks of this city. Again, this is a much larger urban area than how it may appear on the map. The Russian goal is to establish themselves up here in this forested area along the high ground right here. I will take us over to a topographical map, which will allow the Russians to cut off logistics from Zaporizhzhia up here. the direct line of Zaporizhzhia logistics into Orikhiv. And then secondarily, the Russians will try to push up for Shavona right here, which will allow them to completely isolate Orikhiv from all logistics lines in and out of the city. So that's the goal right in this sector right now. And I've talked about this. Let's see. Did I make a thing here? No, I didn't. But I did. I have created posts about Orikhiv and the direction in which the Russians are going to try to attack up through these fields, this forested area right here. There is a river, the Konka River, that divides Orikhiv kind of in half. So the Russians will try to get up on the western bank of that river right here and just control all of the logistics coming into the city. Eventually, they will take the city. In the way that I've seen it happen, the Russians will contest the flanks, get the flanks and the logistics under control, and then probably will fight through Malatok Mak, Novo Delenivka and Novo Andrivka right here, and then eventually enter Orikhiv. That's just sort of the way that the Russians go about this. It tends to be, the encirclement begins. The logistics situation gets so bad that the bottom line, defense line of the salient collapses. The Russians move in. We saw that with Andrivka. We saw that with Bakhmut. We saw that with every other encirclement that the Russians are currently setting up or have completed already previously. The same goes for Holyai-Polye right here. This is going to be the next area where the Russians will push after Orikhiv. Holyai-Polye is smaller and less dense, though, so this will be probably a easier battle for the Russians to take. Similarly to Velika Novoselka right here, remember that these are the three crossroad villages that I talked about. Velika Novoselka is one of these main arteries where every road in the region kind of congregates. And then from there, the Russians have clearly expanded out. You will expect to see something like this after Orikhiv and after Holyai-Polye are captured on the Zaporizhzhia front right here. So after this village right here, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 roads all connect. Velika Novoselka, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 roads all connect. And then obviously Orikhiv is a major cross section of these roads. You have the one from Zaporizhzhia. You have the one that goes up to the east of the country, Prapyznaya, that area. Then you have the road that comes down to Melitopol. You have the road that comes over here to Ernagodar, another important artery, transportation artery. And then finally, the road that goes up to Zaporizhzhia. So Orikhiv is a major objective right now for the Russians. And I do expect that from my personal sources that I have in this area, in the Zaporizhzhia Southern Donetsk front, and from open source intelligence that I've been sifting through, I do think that the Russians are about to begin an offensive in this section of the front. I will put my money where my mouth is here and say that this is where I believe that the Russians are going to push the hardest. However, I personally believe that we will also see a Russian push up here in this northern Kharkov region over the Oskol River up here. So just be on the lookout for that. And then when we're actually looking at the encirclement of Orikhiv, you can kind of see these big half circles developing. And this is just sort of the Russian MO. We see the same thing around Pokrovsk. You can see that there is a giant half circle developing around Pokrovsk. It is getting tighter and tighter. This is, again, an area where I don't expect a ton of Russian advances just because this is such a vital area for the Ukrainians. Another major crossroad. This one's a city compared to the villages, but you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 roads all come into Pokrovsk. It's a huge railway artery. This is a very vital location, but mostly what I'm pointing out here is the encirclement that they're conducting. Same here around Konstantinivka. You can see another encirclement developing up here around Seversk. You can see these have been developed. They're not developing actively, but you can see how the Russians are going to attack at every location across the front. You can see here they're doing the same thing around Borova. They're setting up another encirclement, pushing out in the Lyman direction, in the Oskil direction here, creating another encirclement. It's just the same thing over and over and over and over again, and you're going to continue seeing that across the front by the Russians. So just on this Zaporizhzhia front, this one advance, it is an important advance into Malatakmak. All right, moving over to the southern Donetsk front. Let me come over here and see if anybody said anything. Timiola said, perfect stream for time for Nigeria. I already read that, but I did not see that came with a donation. So thank you so much for that. All right. Okay, moving to the southern Donetsk direction. Russian forces have advanced along the highway here from Constantinople to Komar. Komar right here. So this section of highway, the Russians have advanced along it and have come incredibly close to the village of Bahatir and this large fortification that lies on the intersection of the road from the south and the road that runs east to west. The next battle will likely be in this village. Again, you can see up to the north, the Ukrainians have a pretty strong defensive network still up here. So I would not expect a ton of Russian advance in this direction towards Deshane. I'd expect it more from the north. And I think that the Russians are going to try to encircle this area and cut off the logistics because it is just very densely built up. The Ukrainians enjoy a very large trench network here that is connected and built in. So, oops, did not mean to do that. Oops. Oh, went to a different part of the map. Okay. All right. So, yeah, I expect the Russians to just sort of surround this, and then that's the way that they're going to go forward from here. But again, this area has really slowed down, and it seems like the Russian pressure in this area has let up slightly, just because of Ukrainian rotation. The Ukrainians brought a large amount of troops into this general area to stabilize, and the Russians have just begun pushing in a different area, which is expected. All right, moving up to the Pokrovsk-Myrnohrad front here on the eastern flank. Russian forces have made a pretty significant advance here, capturing some significant fortification networks that lie along the 0504 right here. This is a significant event, basically, in this direction, because this gives the Russians first off, concealment. They're now hiding in trenches, in dugouts, and in that sort of environment in here now, instead of open fields. So that is going to give them an advantage once they begin to push out from this area. But significantly, the Russian forces have entered the village of Myrolubivka, and this is significant because the Russians tend to be they have a significant advantage when it comes to urban combat, and I don't exactly know if it's doctrine that makes them so good in these urban fights, but the Russians tend to do very well. So every time they get into an urban area, that is a bad sign for the Ukrainians. It means that they're most likely not going to be able to remove that Russian presence from that built-up area. And what that means for this front is that the Russians will gain more access to the 0504 here, will begin to push into the outer edges of Myrnohrad itself. These small villages out here on the edge, which I would consider part of Myrnohrad, or a part of the conglomerate at least. It'll mean that the Russians will have a much easier time moving. It's much easier to move house to house than it is to move tree line to tree line. So advancing through these areas, these built up areas, can be beneficial for the Russians. And also the Russians utilize their firepower advantage significantly better in these urban areas where they can identify a Ukrainian position, say the Ukrainians are posted up in this house, and then they'll just drop a number of glide bombs on this facility and destroy it, compared to when the Ukrainians are sitting in something like this. You can drop glide bombs on this all day, and you might mess up one area of this trench, but it's incredibly difficult to uproot Ukrainians that are in, dug in, built up fortifications. The same thing goes for urban areas, but urban areas, like I said, glide bombs are much more effective against buildings like this than they are against open fields. So that's something to keep in the back of your mind. All right. So Russians are now pushing into the urban area, which is very different from anywhere else along this front. You can see that after Hyrdivka, the Russians have sort of been spaced slightly from Pokrovsk and from Myrnohrad. Down here, we can see a little bit of the Russians have pushed in to the urban area, but it's still very tight, and they're not able to quickly move through this area. The Ukrainians are able to defend this pretty well. So this is a major advance. This is going to put the entire Pokrovsk-Myrnohrad front line into a much more difficult situation for the Ukrainians. The Russians should be expected to move along this river right here, the Toretsk River, which, if you follow it, goes all the way up in between these two villages. So we can expect basically everything on that side, everything east of that river, to come under Russian control, in the next couple of weeks. All right, moving down to the garbage front. This is the Toretsk front, sorry. And this particular front right here, I call it the garbage front because we don't see a ton of movement on it. We haven't since the fall of Avdiivka, and the fall of Oshchitny right here. So after Avdiivka fell, after the Russians pushed out along this railroad and established themselves in Arkhangelsk and Kermek, we really did not see any advances on this front. If you remember from my last live stream, I talked about how this area is significantly built up, has significant pre-war fortifications that you can see on Google Earth. They have a number of these fortifications throughout this area. You can see down here, the Russians have captured this one already. And there are more throughout this entire area. You can see there's one over here. So there are a ton of these fortifications in this area. And this is sort of like an Avdiivka area before Avdiivka fell, or a New York area or a Toretsk area. These areas that have massive pre-war fortifications, areas that really the Ukrainians should not be losing under any circumstances when there are softer areas across the front. And when the Ukrainians lose these built up areas, my first thought is, the manpower was moved out of here. And the Russians started advancing on this area of the front when the Ukrainians, moved forces into the Toretsk area to counterattack and stop the Russian advance in this area. So these advances, I would say, are more most likely a symptom of a bigger issue that the AFU is facing, rather than just Russian progress against a grind. So not the Russians forcing the issue, but the Ukrainians being weak, that the Russians can take advantage of that weakness, more or less, if that makes sense. So just the advances here, the bottom half of this pocket has been secured by the Russians. This large fortification, once it falls, is going to be a major setback for the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are likely going to have to back up almost to this large reservoir up here to the north. And with the ongoing situation in Toretsk, I do believe, as I said in my last video, that we will see the front line sort of along this green line here rather soon. And you can already see, since that last video, the Russians have advanced in 4 separate areas in that direction. So already my prediction is sort of coming true. It's not. It might not exactly look like that at the end of the time period it takes them to push out, but they are headed in that direction, and they are making progress towards, like I said, that there's a series of rivers right here that sort of make a low ground that runs from Tresavica all the way up through this reservoir, and then in front of Konstantinivka all the way up to Stepochki. And so the Russians are going to try to capture all of that high ground and establish the front line, like I said, along this green line. So expect most of this pocket that you're seeing right here from Myrnohrad to Chasiv to flatten, level out, and then the entire front is going to be on a slope basically from Orikhiv all the way up to Seversk. It's going to be one straight flat line. And I'm going to take this away so you guys can see. Think about Konstantinivka being the front line. Think about Pokrovsk potentially being captured, and think about Komar, Batyr, this area right here being captured. The entire front is just going to be a slope from Seversk all the way down basically to the Novokhovka reservoir. So the front is moving actually pretty quickly, especially because, the Russians, they do assaults, but there's no committed offensive right now. The Russians are not like banging their heads against the wall as I would say, compared to like the Ukrainians in 2023 or the Russians when they were on the offensive around Ugledar. They were pushing really hard. Right now, the Russians are not pushing significantly hard. They're just mostly taking advantage of the Ukrainian weak spots. All right, moving up. Russian forces have captured Suka Balka here, as well as have advanced the entire front outside of New York. There are some fortifications in this area. There is a fortification right here that was captured by the Russians. There are also fortifications along these tree lines right here that were captured by the Russians. So again, the Ukrainians are losing some pretty significant defensive positions, and really it's not costing the Russians a ton in terms of their attrition. The front is basically not moving, basically just an increase of the gray area here and there. That's not true. That's just simply not true. I don't know how you can say that. This is not gray area. This is 2.2 square miles, 5 square miles. Let's see. And this is all since last week. About a square mile in Toretsk itself. You see over here, let's see, what is this? 5 square miles over here, 3.5 square miles there. Let's go down here. 1.38 square miles. Up here, we have 2.18. And up here, not a full square mile. So all in all, and I forgot the Kursk region up here too. We have 1.67 and 1.67. So if you were to see that from the Ukrainians, everybody would say that the Ukrainians are advancing, they're pushing hard, they're accomplishing everything. And it's just simply, it's just a fallacy. It's just wrong. It's just not true. The Russians are advancing, but the Russian goal is not Ukrainian territory. Ukrainian territory will come in a settlement or will come when there is no Ukrainian army standing in the way. Remember, it's a math game. You are looking at a mathematical equation. This is not necessarily like a war, as in either side could win right now. This is a simple algorithm where you have Ukraine has X number of manpower and material, right? The West is only going to support for so long, whereas Russia has, at the current rate, basically unlimited equipment, unlimited manpower, and they're going to just keep degrading the Ukrainian state until the Ukrainian state collapses. So, yeah, they're not moving like in 2022, but they're also not taking thousands of casualties a day by exposing themselves in completely fruitless offensives against thousands of FPV drones and a United States intelligence service that is actively working with the Ukrainians to harm the Russians as much as possible. You guys, you have to really step back and understand the entire conflict before you start talking about aspects of the conflict, like the Russians aren't advancing. Well, yeah, the Russians aren't advancing tens of kilometers a day because there's no point to do that. There's just no point. The Russians have advantages where they have advantages, and they are going to continue to maximize those advantages while minimizing the shortcomings that the Russian military has. The support has already dried up. They are delusional if they think any more money is going to be appropriated from this Congress. Yeah, no, not from the United States, but it's not going to come from the United States. I've told you guys this for months and months now. Britain, France, Germany, Europe, I guess, but mostly Britain and France and Germany are going to take over this project. And they're not going to take it over in the sense that the US isn't going to be doing anything. They're just going to be the face. They are going to have the liability of this project. The U.S. is going to continue supporting. They're going to continue sending military aid. It's just going to be paid for by Europe, and it's going to be a middleman sort of situation. So this war is not coming to an end anytime soon. There is still a lot of fighting to go on, but you can see that the Ukrainians are more or less collapsing behind the scenes. You have units that are like electronic warfare units. We just got a report today that one of the Ukrainian electronic warfare units has basically been completely stripped of all of its manpower. There's been a lot of complaints that the operations are starting to take a hit because so much of the available manpower from these brigades that are not currently engaged on the front line have been pulled and sent to the front. So you have specialists now of the Ukrainian armed forces that are acting in infantry roles, specialists from the Air Force, specialists from the Air Defense Forces, specialists from electronic warfare, UAV units. All of these different groups are being pulled from their specialties and thrown into the meat grinder because there's just no more infantry available, no more manpower available. I do expect very soon that you will see the deferment for education being removed from Ukrainian citizens. So anybody in college can and will be drafted. I do also believe you will see the 18 to 25-year-old demographic be legally drafted here very soon. I think that's really the next step for the Ukrainians, and it's their last step. They don't have a manpower pool after that. So I get a lot of people laughing at me for the whole collapse comment. I have a collapse series on Twitter right now because they don't see the front line moving, and I try to explain this so graciously. The Ukrainians are not taking a step back. You will not see the collapse until it is unavoidable and it's just right in front of your face. Right now, the collapse is still avoidable. There's still things that can be done. There's still movements that can be made. There's still time to be bought. As soon as that time comes, everything's just gonna hit like that, right? So, yeah. I would not expect this conflict to end. I think 2026 is when we'll see this all wrap up, barring a negotiated settlement. Yeah, I think that's that. So you guys, you have to change your mindset when it comes to this conflict. It's not World War II. It's not Iraq in 2003 or 2003. So how do you envision the collapse? I think it will be a lot less anticlimactic than what you guys suspect. I think first and foremost, the second you start pulling people from the Air Force to throw them into infantry roles, you're in a collapse, right? If Germany was pulling people from the Luftwaffe to go fight in Poland against the Soviets, you would say, well, that's not boding very well for the German military, is it? Right? Why are we sending pilots or mechanics to the front line to just go die as infantry? Well, because we're collapsing and we seriously have no other available resources to plug holes and stop this calamity that's happening on the front line, right? And while the entire Ukrainian regime's policy is to avoid any poor imaging of the AFU, right? So everything is the Russians are failing. They're dying in droves. They're not advancing, except they are advancing, but where they are advancing, we're doing a lot of damage, that this, that, or the other. You're never going to see, there's never going to be willful withdrawals. I've been waiting for 3 years for the Ukrainians to pull their heads out of their asses and start retreating from salients. They don't do it. They'll sit in a pocket and they will sacrifice tens of thousands of Ukrainians just for the publicity of not retreating. It's unbelievable, right? So the collapse will come probably in the form of regime change, I imagine. That's probably how it's going to come. And it's just going to happen so suddenly. One day we're going to be watching the conflict. The next day we're going to be looking at basically a police action inside of the state of Ukraine. That's how I envision it happening. Are you comparing the Ukrainians with the Nazis, Scott? Yeah, because it's the most relatable large-scale conflict in Europe since World War II. I mean, I don't know how else you can explain it. This is where the Nazis and the Russians literally fought in the Donbass region of Ukraine. So, I think that there's some very clear comparisons, and I think that it's also good to make comparisons because a lot of pro-Ukrainians have this idea that Ukraine is the good guys. And when you have that mentality, it does affect your analysis. It does affect your bias and how you're going about reporting or analyzing the conflict. When you relate the position that the Ukrainians are in to the position that the Germans were in, and not obviously the negative connotations of, they're Nazis, this, that, or the other. That's not the comparison I'm making. I'm making a comparison between two militaries that were in similar positions. The only difference is the scale, right? The scale of World War II was much bigger. So the advances, the casualties, everything was at a much grander scale compared to this. However, the same rules, the same ideas are applicable because the style of warfare is very similar to the way that the Germans fought. The no retreat. You look at Stalingrad. The first thing I think of when I see Stalingrad is Bakhmut, right? That's like the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of Stalingrad. I think of an army that was in a very good position and then slowly got put into a worse position as time went on, and that position just became worse and more foul and disgusting for the AFU. And eventually they were routed out of that city. And that battle, the Battle of Bakhmut, just like the Battle of Stalingrad, stained the future of the Ukraine conflict, just like it stained the German conflict, World War II, right? The 2023 counteroffensive was dramatically damaged by the attrition that the Ukrainians took in Bakhmut, right? Same with Stalingrad, and then the battle for Kursk was a lot less volatile. It was still one of the largest battles of all time, and the largest tank battle of all time, I believe, but it was much less than it could have been if the entire Sixth Army wouldn't have been destroyed in Stalingrad. That's what I'm saying. All right, let me go and finish these updates. Sorry, guys, I got a little sidetracked there. All right, so in Toretsk, Russian forces have captured the two Terekons, the two high grounds in the area. The Ukrainians actually counterattacked. I don't know if it was for this one, or this larger one down here, this bigger one. But there was a Ukrainian counterattack that did end up in a pretty bad ambush. So I do believe that this is more or less the stable look that the front will have from now on. Here, the Russians have advanced out and into this large mining facility here. There were reports that Russian forces had reached up into Nelepivka up here. There were two geolocations. However, we have not seen anything since that time, and it is assumed that assault did not succeed and a foothold was not gained. But that would have been a pretty wild advance for the current position. Here in Deshane, this is the Russian Ministry of Defense claimed that they had captured this 2 weeks ago. We just got a geolocation now, so I'm not confirming that the Russian Ministry of Defense was correct, but they are. The statement is now correct. Deshane has been captured by Russian forces. Again, just more progress in the Toretsk area, which was to be expected as we saw Ukrainian counterattacks in this region. Those Ukrainian counterattacks drew in Russian forces. The Russian forces are now, poised here to advance. So that's what you're beginning to see. All right, moving up here to the Lyman front, Russian forces have pushed into the village of Nove and have advanced up into the village of Redokadub, although it is unknown if the Russians actually control this entire area. Some sources like Syriac have the Russians behind this line, although I don't know where they got the geo confirmation of that, really. Syriac does a lot of these little micro updates that he will then undo later, like the next day. So I don't tend to buy into that as much. If there's an actual change, I will tend to make it. All right. Moving up to the Kupiansk front, Russian forces have made a small advance here north of the village of Krindashivka into the village of Malashapivka. And again, not a major advance, but just better Russian positioning here north of the city of Kupiansk. All right, moving over to Kursk. Finally, Russian forces have captured the village of Oleshina here on the border. So the entire northern pocket has now been confirmed captured. Down here in the southern pocket, Russian forces advanced into this monastery area here. Again, Syriac did a correction where he said that the Ukrainians had counterattacked up into this area, although I have not seen the geolocation for that. Gornal remains the only village in the Kursk region under Ukrainian control. Ukrainians are still maintaining their little area here into Belgorod as well. Okay. If you guys have some questions, go ahead and get some questions in. I am done with all of my updates. I guess we can talk about what this show is titled, the Easter Ceasefire. So on Friday, right before the weekend began, Putin came out and offered a ceasefire, a 2-day ceasefire that would just last for the Easter weekend. And I'm going to just be very opinionated about all of this because I believe that I'm right, and I'm just going to stick with that. I think that this was a good move by Putin. It was one of these offers that you put on the table, and there's really no good option for the other side. The Ukrainians at first came out and turned down the ceasefire. They did not want to go about an Easter ceasefire because it truly doesn't make sense for either side. It does not make any sense other than, you get a day's break. You get to shore up things. You don't have to worry about FPV drones killing you for a day. I mean, there's small aspects, but really to the larger picture of the war, this ceasefire doesn't do anything. It does nothing. It's just a political game being played. Putin basically comes out and says, look, we'll do this ceasefire. We'll acknowledge it if you acknowledge it. And it puts the proverbial ball into Ukraine's court saying, well, we're offering a cessation of hostilities over the resurrection of Christ, right? This is a large holiday that we all celebrate. We would all like to not be killing each other today. Let's do this. And the Ukrainians were put into a position where they either accept it and go along with what Putin is demanding of them, or asking of them, which is not what they want to do, or they turn it down, and then they look like the evil monsters who don't want a ceasefire on Easter. The ceasefire was more or less adhered to by both sides. The Ukrainians did strike Donetsk with some large MLRS barrage. That did happen. Putin said that there were 5,000 ceasefire violations over the 2-day period, which doesn't seem particularly, I mean, it's a lot, but when you're counting every single drone, every single artillery shell fired, 5,000 across 2 days across a massive front like that is not particularly horrible. It's not great, but it's actually kind of interesting that it held as well as it did. I did not expect it to hold that well. And it's now over. And so this short little ceasefire lasted. Putin got his little bit of propaganda out of it. He got to say that the Ukrainians violated it 5,000 times, this, that, or the other. I know that there were some civilians that were hurt in Donetsk and some civilians that were hurt in Kursk and the Belgorod regions. But other than that, I do believe that there were some civilian casualties in Kherson during this time too. At least that's the Ukrainian claim. So there were some violations of the ceasefire. It wasn't clear cut and perfect, but overall it held. And then immediately following the end of the 20th, which was Easter, we saw the Russians resume. Garand took off, missile strikes resumed, and glide bombs continued to fall. So sort of just a small episode. I think it was more of a chess game being played by Putin, offering something that, basically the other side can't turn down, or they look like the bad guys. Win-win for Putin. And now they resume. And so that was that. And it was all just nothing to me. That's my opinion on it. It was just a charade that both sides sort of agreed to because they thought it was sort of the right thing to do. That's my opinion. I don't see this as emblematic of anything. And I don't see this changing the situation between Russia, Ukraine, the United States, and Europe at all. All right. How long do you expect Ukraine to hold out from now? Well, it depends on what you mean. I think there's going to be varying degrees of holding out, right? Eventually, they're going to have to pick areas where they're going to lose. So do you mean holding out as in the line isn't moving like it's not moving right now? Because if you say that, I mean, that could be 6 months. That could be a year. You could see minimal Russian movement and just the degradation of the Ukrainian army. But I do think everything's going to start slipping here soon. I think it's going to get worse and worse and snowball, and then that regime change will finally come. Question. What do you think about Marco Rubio saying they will move on? Yeah, actually, I was going to go over to my bookmarks and show you guys some of the talk going on. So first and foremost, they will drop Ukraine to attack Iran or China. I think that this is what they've been talking about since February. This is the division of labor, right? This is the continued plan for the United States. Pivot to China and let the different arms of the empire take over their respective corners. And this is how an empire is supposed to work. We've been living in this sort of golden era of the United States' hegemony where, nobody's threatening the United States really. And anytime the United States needs to take care of somebody, they can do so themselves. Not only are they taking care of their enemies, but they're also taking care of their allies through massive subsidy programs. And it all works really well when there's nothing really going on. But the second that something begins happening, all of that waste, all of that excess starts to really drag you down. And so what you're seeing is the streamlining of the empire, the bloated post-Cold War United States is not going to exist in 10 years. You are going to see a very methodical, ruthless, U.S. hegemony that is going to come out of this sort of transition period, and that includes the bringing up of Europe in terms of their defense. That includes probably the changing of regimes in Iran, and obviously the pivot to China to focus on that. So I don't think they're not going to drop Ukraine. That's not what this means. They're going to, on the surface, it's going to appear as though they're abandoning Ukraine, but I promise you, in a year's time, you will see some news report about how weapons are being funneled through Europe, intelligence is being funneled through Europe, money is being funneled through Europe into Ukraine, because unless they resolve it, the U.S. cannot back out of Europe, cannot let Russia's sphere of influence increase in Europe. They cannot back out of the Middle East. They cannot let Israel be isolated and suffocated in that way. Not that Israel is like it's not like a major economy or anything, but you don't want to be surrounded, right? Israel is the US's military forward operating base in the Middle East. It is their reason to be there. It is their reason to control that entire region, right? It's just their excuse, our excuse. So yeah, they're not going to let those two go, and China is the up and coming threat. So it's just a natural transition. Are Americans doing a 360 on Ukraine? Not really. I would say they're doing a 20-degree shift, because nobody really ever cared about Ukraine. Americans, if you're talking about us Americans, no, we don't. We couldn't give a shit. America, as in the administration, the political class, they are doing a 180. I wouldn't say 360. 360 would mean that they're coming right back around to the position they were before. I think that the U.S. does really want to get rid of its liability towards Ukraine. It knows what's coming, and it needs to get out. So, yeah. Question. The ancient Egyptians never admitted defeat, even when they were clearly defeated, like the Battle of Kadesh. What do you think modern Western media? Do you think modern Western media will do the same? And if so, why? Yeah, I mean, we've seen this. All you have to do is look at Vietnam, Afghanistan, these horrible losses for the United States in terms of, how we removed ourselves. We didn't necessarily lose in Vietnam. We were there for so long, and we were like, okay, we should probably just leave because this isn't working out. Same with Afghanistan. We didn't lose in Afghanistan. You can't destroy an ideology that hides in caves and mountains. And every time you kill part of that ideology, you just create 3 new ideologues out of it. So yeah, you're not really losing, but the way that we pulled out, the end result definitely looks like a loss. But does anybody in America even talk about Afghanistan? Does anybody even talk about what's going on in Iraq, in Vietnam? No. Is anybody talking about us pulling out of Syria? No, because nobody cares. The only reason that anybody pays attention is because it's important for 5 minutes, and it's shoved in their face, and they think it's very important. So I think that there is going to be certain realities that you can't ignore if the U.S. really loses something major. I don't think that they're just going to be able to just say that they didn't lose. But when you're talking about an empire, it's really hard for them to lose, right? And you're always just going to hear the argument, well, we lost the battle, but we haven't lost the war, sort of thing. And I think that's more or less how they're going to play off losses like that in the future moving forward. Do you think Germany will sign off on Taurus missiles, or is it more rhetoric? Yeah, I think that I said that those were coming when Storm Shadow and ATACMS were approved. It's just the next step, right? It's the only other thing they have. So yeah, why not? What difference is it going to make? Are the Russians going to do anything different? Fuck no. They're not. They didn't do anything different for ATACMs. They didn't do anything different for Storm Shadow. It just ruins the possibility of negotiations, which is what the U.S. wants. So the second those missiles get sent, you know what direction the war is going. Trump seems to want some kind of deal finished before May. When that doesn't happen, what will he do? I do believe that they are going to pivot away. I don't think a deal will get done. And I think they're going to use that as their excuse for their off ramp to let Europe take over the project. I don't know if you're talking to me. Will the U.S. ever lose its soft power advantage, or in other words, will the world cease being cattle to? No. This is something we do very well, and it's something that is going to take decades to erode. Right? The U.S. We have Hollywood, right? Everybody in the world watches our movies and watches our perspective on how the world works and operates. So you might see a slight diminishing of this in places like Europe after what we've seen with Ukraine, but unsurprisingly, the Philippines and some countries in the South China Sea are already signing up to be the next Ukraine. So no, I don't think you're ever going to get rid of that. I think that there are certain parts of the US and the Western world that are very appealing, even if they're not true. That still the idea of it is more appealing than what the alternative is, even if the alternative is better and more real. No, not you. Just these Yuki bros who are citing Ukrainian MOD. Oh yeah, yeah. Well, anybody who cites an MOD, unironically or for not for the purpose of showing what one side is claiming. If they're unironically using those numbers as real numbers, yeah, you just ignore anything those people say. It's a joke. If you're believing a Ministry of Defense, whether it's the Russian Ministry of Defense, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, the Pentagon, MI6, any of that, it's just you're a fool. They're lying to you. That's what they do. They do it on purpose. They do it intentionally. That's what war is. The first casualty in war is the truth. How long until the U.S. gets hypersonic shovels? Well, they just canceled their hypersonic anti-ship missile program. Didn't work out. The U.S. seems to have incredible issues producing hypersonic technologies. Prospects of a second U.S. civil war after the end of the war. It's always a possibility. I think that you have too much Western influence and money, though, that you're not going to necessarily see that. Also, I think after 3 years of war, everybody will be pretty tired of war, but I could be wrong. I don't think it will be considered a civil war, though, just because the country has been invaded by Russia. So now any conflict that transpires is going to be non-civil, right? In terms of definition. I still don't understand why some people still support the invaders. Because some people don't like what the U.S. does all over the world. I mean, you should just be unable to understand that. As a functioning adult human being, you should understand that some people don't like having bombs dropped on them. And when they don't like having bombs dropped on them, they will support anything that goes against the thing that they hate. That's a human condition, Jim. Just like you hate the Russians for literally almost no reason, and you talk about it and you're in my chat all the time, and you're so mad at them for all of these fake propaganda reasons that you've chose to believe without doing due diligent research. your due diligence or research, that's sort of the deal. Yeah. And it's just the same reason why people hate Russians. Just like you hate the Russians for invading Ukraine or whatever, it's the exact same as why people support the Russians. The exact same reasons, just reversed. But that's the thing. That's the thing about people like Jim and a lot of these people. It's something that I've noticed with a lot of the pro-Ukrainian group is they have no self-reflection. They have no ability to think even maturely. Just be like, oh, I wonder how the Russians, why did anybody ever support them? Why the hell do you think? Because of Afghanistan and Iraq and Georgia and what the U.S. has done, it continued to do, right? All over the world, especially towards Russia. The sanctioning of the country, the open stating that they're going to use every last Ukrainian because Ukrainians don't matter. The only thing they're good for is killing more Russians. Lindsey Graham, literally one of our congressmen, said that in front of Zelensky. The best goddamn money we've ever spent. That's why people support the Russians. And if you're too daft to understand that, you're part of the reason why people support the Russians. Moron, dude. People are so stupid. It's crazy. Oh, I don't dislike the Russians. I despise their government. And there are many Russians that don't support Putin. Well, that's just not true. He's got like 80% approval in country. So you're just kind of fucking wrong. So either all Russians are bad because they support the SMO, or, you know, you just dislike the government who has the support of most of their people. Cool. Whatever. You can try to work your way around this, Jim. It's just not going to work out, man. You can say that you don't like Putin, but when all of the Russians are happy with what he's doing because he's actually making their country better, you hate the Russians. That's the only logical conclusion there. Or you think they're just so brainwashed and stupid, but I mean, that's literally, you could just say that about any group of people anywhere who support anybody. So, yeah. All right, that's enough time for Jim. Thank you for making me feel better about myself, though. Appreciate it. I hate people everywhere. That's good. Just be blanket, just blanket the whole, generalize, just hate everybody. It's not bad if you do it generically across the board. All right, guys. I think that's where I'm going to wrap it up. That takes us to an hour. Thank you so much, my Euro bros, for being in here. Thank you, everybody else who watches after this is recorded and posted. Please, if you guys have not yet liked, commented, and subscribed, it is the easiest way to support me. I appreciate you all so much, and I will be doing a live stream on Wednesday. So tune in for that. It will be a late live stream on Wednesday. So that is when I will be on here next. Thank you guys so much for coming in and talking to me today, conversating, adding to the stream. I appreciate it all so much. And I will see you guys on the next one. Take care and goodbye.